Hello, listeners. Welcome to this episode of Bevere Broadcasters, a podcast about new developments in agri-food issues brought to you by the Communicating Agriculture class at the University of Illinois. We named our podcast Bevere Broadcasters after Bevere Hall on the Champaign-Urbana campus, where we meet for class. I'm Kaleb Reed. I'm currently a junior here at the University of Illinois studying crop agribusiness from Monticello, Illinois, and with me,
Maria Velasquez from Chicago, Illinois. I'm a crop science major, and this is my last semester. I'll be graduating soon, so that's exciting.
Congratulations.
Thank you, and we're here with our other co-host.
My name is Alexis Alvarado. I'm a junior. I'm majoring in construction management and majoring in communications, and I am also from Chicago, Illinois.
And today, you're going to be hearing about some new developments in reducing cow methane and why it's important to you. But first of all, before we get into that, what's extreme weather we've had today?
Yeah, kind of a nightmare, a beautiful nightmare at times. Not very nice to bike in, but man, it was snowing today. Our first snow of the year.
Yeah, it was pretty incredible. The sleet and 20 to 25 miles an hour wind. Mm-hmm. I can tell you it was very miserable walking to class, and on the way back with the wind at your back, it was somewhat bearable. But anyway, I think we're going to go ahead and kick this off with the new development of today. And Maria, so what are we looking at with methane production? Where does it all start?
Yeah, so methane comes from so many different places, like many other compounds, natural compounds on Earth. There's different processes, and methane in particular is one of the most abundant gaseous compounds in the atmosphere. And it's also a very potent greenhouse gas. It's odorless, it's colorless, and usually it's stable, but sometimes it has the tendency to explode under certain volumetric conditions, like in coal mines. So the fossil fuel industry produces a whole lot of methane. In natural settings, it comes from burning biomass or anaerobic conditions under the sea, plant decay in natural wetlands, and even food waste that's in our landfills. But today we're going to be mainly focusing on methane production from the digestive processes of livestock animals.
Gotcha. And so the graphic that you've displayed in front of us is really interesting.
Mm-hmm.
When I look at this, I really think about, going back to third or fourth grade and seeing the chart on the water cycle.
Oh, yeah.
And, now in college, seeing the nitrogen cycle. Well, this is the methane cycle, and you have some areas of like burning biomass, or it's some trees on fire or forests on fire, which is producing the CH4. You've got your digestive products in domestic animals, and there's two pigs on the screen. Obviously, we're not talking about pigs today, but it is interesting to get to see how some different environments can produce this methane.
Mm-hmm. Yep.
Now, one of the interesting things about that, too, is the other graphic that you've provided, and I will let you talk through that one.
Yeah, sure. So the graphic we're looking at is sort of going over the digestive process inside of a cow. So a cow is like a ruminant animal. Ruminant animals include elk and sheep and buffalo, and they have 4 different compartments in their stomach, which means that their food is ingested, fermented, and regurgitated and digested again. So there's like this whole incredible process going on in these animals. And in the rumen of a cow, it'll digest and ferment really tough fibrous plant materials, so hay and grass. And during that fermentation, the methanogens in there sort of are digesting this whole thing, and the cow is burping methane. It is burping a whole lot of methane.
I gotcha. And, this graphic that you're displaying here, I can't tell you whether you should put the cow in the x-ray machine to explain this one, or if you cut a cow in half and got to see all of its stomachs, but it's really interesting to get to watch and see how methane really travels through the system. On top of that, now that we're bringing this new development up, has there been anything that's happened in the past? How have people dealt with it prior to this?
So prior to this new development, really it all meant that the rancher had to provide quality forage for their cows and their cattle. And that means including foods like legumes, which are definitely a lot easier to digest for the cows than the tough, fibrous hay and grass.
Sure.
And there's actually been some newer developments in the last few years that include seaweed amendment. And seaweed, there's two particular species of seaweed that have shown to reduce methane in cows, by a whole lot. And so it's been a very interesting process over the last few years in methane reduction in cows.
Say, and I've heard that that's Hawaiian seaweed. Does that sound correct?
Yeah, there are a few. There's also red seaweed.
Mm-hmm. So anyway, moving on. So now it's time to get into the true new development, which Alexis will continue on with.
So now that we've talked about methane and how it's produced, well, I'm pretty sure you guys are wondering what the new development is. So the new development is Bovaer. So you guys might be wondering what Bovaer is. Bovaer is a specific kind of feed supplement. It's like an add-on to cattle food that helps them produce less methane. So since cows produce less methane generally, this affects the environment because methane is a greenhouse gas. So when it gets to the atmosphere, so since you guys already know, since when it gets to the atmosphere, this contributes to climate change. Since cattle farming is a huge source of methane, we've been trying to figure out a way to prevent this.
I wanted to point out there, what was that about 30 to 45%?
So this is so there's a quarter teaspoon per day. This is what Bovaer does.
Okay.
A quarter teaspoon per day per cow helps cut emissions by 30 to 45%.
A quarter teaspoon per day. That's all it takes. That's incredible.
That's almost nothing, honestly. For like a huge animal like that, a quarter of a teaspoon. That's all it takes.
So, Bovaer, as we've started talking about, how does it work? And I see you brought a big word in front of me, and I don't know how to pronounce that, but do you have any idea?
Yeah, you want to give it a try?
So its abbreviation is 3-NOP. I'm going to try to pronounce it. It's nitrooxypropanol.
Sure.
I would say.
That's better than I think any of us could have attempted to say it.
So since I'm going to use the abbreviation, which is 3-NOP, since Bovaer contains 3-NOP, when cows eat this, it interacts with their microbes and stops them from creating so much methane. So it slows it down. Also, cows have a unique digestive system which helps them break down plants and other tough materials. There's a part there that the cows have, which is called the rumen. That rumen has specific microbes. One of them is called methanogens, which is responsible for creating methane in cows. Inside methanogens is an enzyme called MCR. So it's another hard word. MCR, I'm going to try to pronounce it again, is the role of enzyme methyl coenzyme.
I may be able to help out with that. Enzyme methanol coenzyme.
So inside the rumen, there's specific microbes called methanogens. Inside the methanogens is where the MCR is located. The MCR is needed to create methane gas, which acts like a switch in cattle that helps them produce methane. Methanogens are responsible for creating methane, as I had previously said. So when cows eat Bovaer, the 3-NOP goes into the rumen and inhibits the MCR enzymes, which allows the 3-NOP to block the switch that produces methanogens to produce methane. So when it blocks the switch, it makes them produce less methane, or they don't produce any methane at all.
Wow, seems like a pretty effective process. So I don't think this is an ad, but who exactly is making this product?
So you might be wondering who's making this product. So the ones responsible for this product is called Royal DCM. DCM stands for Dutch State Mines. It's a company based in the Netherlands. You might be wondering what their purpose is. So their purpose is to help improve the health and sensibility. So Royal DCM wanted to help farmers and the environment by reducing methane emissions for cows.
Interesting. And I do want to note that from our readings, one cow will produce enough methane in 1 year to charge 144 iPhones. And on top of that, 3 cows producing methane is about the same as one family-sized SUV traveling on the road. And to me, that's just incredible to be able to know that this product can help cut down on that much methane production. Maybe it is a small sector of the world, but it's very interesting to find that out.
Yeah, and I forgot to mention that it's actually really quite energy taxing on those cows to be burping up all that methane. I think 6 to 10% of their gross energy intake is lost as methane. And cows are so good at grazing. I mean, they take 20,000 to 40,000 bites per grazing. That's crazy. 1/3 of their entire time is spent grazing. The other third chewing the cud, which is a very common, very known sort of term for rumination.
Chewing the cud.
Oh yeah, chewing the cud. And here again, the food's regurgitated, it's swallowed repeatedly, and the last third of their time is just kind of standing around idly. So you can see how methane production is super important, not only for the environment, but also for ranchers who just don't want to be taking all that time, having their cattle out there grazing. It's been calculated that all that methane equates to about 40 days of grazing for dairy cows, 50 to 60 days for steers. So that's an incredible amount of energy spent on just burping.
That's very interesting. If I were the cow in that position, spending less time having to do anything at that point would be pretty awesome. But anyway, so moving forward, we would like to talk on some of the media coverage. How has the media pursued this? So our first piece of information here comes straight from Feed Navigator from June of this year, and it states that Australian researchers have shown both liquid and pelletized forms of the red seaweed has significantly reduced methane emissions in dairy cows without affecting milk safely. And to me, that's just pretty incredible that, and of course, as I've mentioned earlier, this is that Hawaiian-based seaweed. This is, the red seaweed. It's not necessarily Bovaer, but it has been proven now to not affect milk and while also significantly reducing that methane. And it's pretty interesting to get to see that another part of the person interviewed by Feed Navigator said that with a methane suppressing effect of more than 20%, it's one of the most promising of many feeding strategies we have investigated. And this comes directly from Richard Williams. But anyway, our second topic is straight from Forbes, which, not one that's ag-related or that we necessarily see ag information come out from as of November of 2020, a little dated, but still starting to see where this is taken off from. But with Forbes, they have said that Hawaiian seaweed makes cows 90% less gassy, and that's good for climate change. It's very interesting to mention that 80%, I think you had said, Maria, 80% of the methane that comes from cattle is through burps.
Burps, yeah.
But it is funny to see that, they start saying gassy in another sense.
Oh, yeah.
It used to be the running joke.
Uh-huh.
But again, this one's talking a lot about the red seaweed, and I am not going to attempt to say that. It's a little harder word, but even they say it. A. taxiformis for short. It's a startup that's turning into a supplement for livestock called Symbrosia. Research has shown that replacing just 0.4% of a cow's feed with the taxiformis reduces the amount of methane that cows produce by over 90%.
Wow.
And that's been dated, so it's interesting to also see how, with time, how well this has taken off. Our third article here comes from Farm Week Now, another ag-based news source from May of this year. FDA approves dairy feed additive to reduce methane and also creates carbon credits. Now, to me, as I've grown up on a farm, not necessarily had more than 2 cows, and my grandpa didn't really want to have more than 2 cows. I can't imagine what the price tag on something of this looks like. But if they're starting to create carbon credits and we could potentially make money on said carbon credits, could this really be something that it could be used on our farm? Personally, again, 2 cows? Maria,
Right.
2 cows may not do much, but I could see where if you're feeding hundreds of head of cattle every day, this could be something that, okay, let's add a little bit. 100 teaspoons, I'd hate to count that out, and I'd rather do a conversion on that. But, it's really good to see that, the FDA is now finally creating carbon credits just for this simple feed additive that hopefully would help identify this with the growers to say, here, we can do this now.
Right, an incentive. And we were having this conversation in class. What exactly are there incentives for farmers and ranchers besides carbon credits?
So the other thing that I wanted to point out too with the Farm Week Now, one of their statements was the USDA has already provided $90 million in conservation grant funding to help prepare at least some dairies to take advantage of feed additives that lower methane emissions. And to me, that's incredible that as of May of this year, they've already taken off with starting to provide some funding to help this kick off. It really seems like it's got to be worth something, especially if the FDA is getting behind it.
Yeah, absolutely.
So the Washington Post is not necessarily a site that I thought I would find something of this nature on, and luckily through doing some research, and this was actually one of our most recent articles as of August 25th of this year, their statement was scientists may have found a radical solution for making your hamburger less bad for the planet.
That's a pretty good headline.
Personally, I had never thought that eating a hamburger was, driving up to McDonald's, getting a hamburger was really all that bad of a deal. And have either one of you ever thought of it that way?
Sometimes.
I agree.
But so Davis out of California starts this segment off with Sushi. A 4-week-old Holstein calf was lying in a pen under the hum of a metal fan when a group of professors and graduate students arrived to sample his stomach.
Wow.
The male calf greeted the researchers with a friendly nibble of their clothing, then flopped back down lazily on the bed of rice hulls.
Aww.
But even as the calf slumbered deep in his 4-chambered stomach, municipal organisms were hard at work. Fungi, bacteria, and other tiny creatures were breaking down feed into energy and chemicals, setting in motion an ancient process that today heats the earth more than every flight across the world combined. I'm not necessarily sure how true that statement is, but that is pretty
that seems
incredible.
Pretty drastic.
And lastly, scientists here are hunting for a way to transform Sushi's gut so that he no longer releases this planet-warming methane. Now, to me, it's a pretty great story, if it was in the storytelling side of things. However, it is very interesting to just know that these scientists may start using Bovaer and measure how much Sushi's stomach changes over the next, as she's only 4 weeks old, how many months will it take for this to start going on, and where we go from here.
Yeah, and an article like this is going to introduce people that don't really know what it means to reduce methane and the importance of it. Just learning about sushi, and a story like that's really going to let people know what all this means.
Yeah, and so Bovaer, as our new development, is pretty interesting to get to see.
So I'm pretty sure we have 2 questions. One of the main questions is, since a 1/4 teaspoon per cow per day cuts methane emissions from 30% through 45%, I'm pretty sure the main question is, why don't we use more than a teaspoon? So The reason we don't use more than 1 teaspoon per day is because cattle typically don't require more than 1 teaspoon of bover because it's highly concentrated feed addictive designed to reduce methane emissions. Even a small quantities of bover can effectively inhibit the enzymes that I talked about earlier that produce methane in the rumen, leading to a significant reduction in methane output without needing large amounts. So that's one of the questions I had, but I'm pretty sure another main question is how much does bover cost? So when we did our research, we found out that the cost of a bird can vary depending on factors such as the region, supplier, and bulk purchase agreements.
Oh, sure. I couldn't imagine having to ship it across the world. I mean, and at that point, it may be more expensive than just the feed itself.
So as a recent estimate, bird typically cost around $3 to $5 per cow per year.
Oh,
Oh.
Lord. That's cheap.
And that's a
Wow.
year. So that's a year. So a day it costs up to 2 cents or to even 5 cents, depending on the cow.
That's
Wow.
incredible.
I mean, it'll stack up eventually for like a rancher or a ranch farm that has probably hundreds of cattle, but I mean, it doesn't sound as expensive as I thought it was going to be.
If not thousands of head of cattle being moved, and to understand that it's $3 to $5 per head. I understand that my grandpa may not like me adding this on to him, but that's not something that I would be too terribly afraid of purchasing on my own. Again, personally, but it's really interesting to know that you can potentially gain carbon credits through the FDA. You can cut methane emissions in at least dairy cattle by 30 to 45%.
Plus, it seems like it's pretty safe for the consumer too.
Yes,
Both the
exactly.
seaweed supplement and Bovaer, so seems like a win-win-win.
And on that note, we'll go ahead and wrap up this episode of the Bevere Broadcasters. We hope you're now a little more familiar with new developments in the methane production in cattle. And through this podcast, we've helped deepen your understanding and appreciation for our wonderfully complex agri-food system. Please be sure to check out other episodes from Classmates. Once again, I'm Caleb Reed.
I'm Maria Velasquez.
And I'm Alexis Alvarado.
And thank you for listening.
Thank you.